we are with William and Sylvan, Restless Eggs. William, I'm going to hand over to you first. Why don't you tell us the elevator pitch version of what the Restless Egg actually is?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for having us. It's a true pleasure. Uh, so Restless Egg is an incubator for artist founders, for creators who treat technology as their medium or their canvas. Basically, the idea is that there is a cohort of people who are having the genre of ideas that will come to shape the future of technology. And those people are not yet visible, legible, understandable to the ecosystem that would permission them to scale their ideas to the fullest extent. So if you look at the Silicon Valley ecosystem, the amount of capital that's present there, you can think of it as a permissioning infrastructure, that those people are told, whatever dream you have, you can acquire capital and pursue it to the fullest extent. And then if you look at the art world or the academy, you see really a similar kind of dream, but not the permissioning infrastructure to pursue it. And so Sylvan and I encountered a very specific group of people working on the frontiers of technology through methods of creative experimentation. And as we were ourselves going through programs dedicated to this, we realized this total disparity in terms of financial incentives, sustainable financial ecosystem, and we saw the way that the the most successful people were forced to step onto this grant or fellowship treadmill um, that really short circuited the possibility for them to scale their most ambitious ideas. And at the same time, we saw that the technological status quo was basically calling out for the ideas that these people were having. I mean, we talk about a lot how the AI revolution is, over a trillion in capex right now. Last night, Google just raised their spend from 75 to 85 billion.
Mm.
And the big question is, why? What is all of this for? And the hyperscalers have this answer that's like, it's winner take all or winner take most, so we can't afford to not play. I mean, Google is in a special case of that because they know their search business is being cannibalized, so they have to invest in AI as much as possible. But this genre of creative experimentation that we encountered, these are people who are answering the question what AI is for. And they're doing it in a way that right now is not receiving the funding to scale and the support to be distributed widely so that their products, so that their ideas can be really taken up and adopted.
Amazing response. I That question of what AI is for is really what stands out for me there. But I want to delve into this community or this cohort of people that you guys sort of seem to stumble upon or discover, on your own journeys. I was lucky enough to attend the Restless Egg event recently and meet an incredible cross section of people from all these different areas of discipline. And, it got me thinking, like, I didn't know these people existed, and what are these programs that people keep referencing where they met? So tell me a little bit about the kind of the origin story and like where are these people hanging out?
Yeah, I'll go first, and then I'll pass it to you to tell your version of it, Sylvan. Um, for me, I'm going to take it actually all the way back to middle school to tell this story when I got hooked on philosophy for the first time, and I think I started reading some of the core philosophical texts. I think I read the Communist Manifesto, and I was like, these ideas really move the wheels of history, and I was like, an ambitious little seventh grader. So I was like, I will dedicate myself to philosophy and move the wheels of history in a like manner. Fast forward to graduate school, and you realize that's really not what the academy is set up to do these days. And that's a disappointing realization, especially when you've dedicated yourself to becoming an academic since you were in middle school. And so for me, I was like in this weird place where I had all of this ambition, but all this path dependency. And I didn't see a way out. So I basically stumbled into this program called Antikythera, which is the sort of evolution of Strelka, directed by Benjamin Bratton and run out of the Berggruen Institute now in Los Angeles. Um, and when I got to the Antikythera studio, which was a 6-month program that started in 2023, I basically had this experience that Haley Albert likes to refer to as having your eyelids peeled back over your head. And what she means by this, and how I understand it anyway, is that I was suddenly confronted with a group of people who were thinking at the forefront of philosophical thought about what technology could do, but were also developing applications, prototypes, films, whatever, media objects that actually put this into practice. And so for me, as a dyed-in-the-wool academic, I was like, holy cannoli, Batman, like these people are actually doing the thing and they're thinking about it. And I was like blown away. So that was my sort of first eureka moment, was that there were people thinking on the edges of philosophy and actually building the tools to match their philosophical inquiry. The second moment is the one that really sort of answers your question, which is that Antikythera ended. And at the end of it, I was like, what am I supposed to do now? Because I don't want to go back to, the way things were before. After you've had your eyelids peeled back over your head, you don't want to go back to having regular eyelids. Um, and so I did what I think a lot of people who enter this space from various places do, is you start going to different residencies, art residencies, and that becomes a kind of occupation as you're looking for the next residency to go spend time with more of these people who are thinking in this way. That's actually how I met Sylvan at one of them, at the Media Lab in Madrid, where we were match made by Bogna Konyer, which was really an incredibly far-sighted decision on her part. Um, but when Sylvan and I got connected, we were working on this game project, which I can tell you about. But the point to make here is that we sort of looked at each other and looked around, and we're like, we felt an immediate kinship about the fact that we were just totally in awe of the kind of person here, and yet also totally befuddled at why there wasn't a kind of lasting infrastructure for them, and why it had to be this kind of grant treadmill cycle. So I think, to put a very fine point on your question, I think a lot of sort of small scale residencies, fellowships, minor institutions have been set up to sort of respond to these people who have fallen through the cracks in traditional institutions. And I think that's great. There's like a kind of invisible college of these people who know each other. And once you come to one of these events, you're like, oh, all of these people seem to like interact, and like they're all connected by this giant network. And I think our response was not to like try to reinvent the wheel or do something that, totally out of left field. It was just, there's a form factor here that this space does not currently have access to, which is the product. There's not a infrastructure that enables these people to develop products, and that's seen as something that is potentially either anathema or just not aligned to their skill set. And that's basically what Restless Egg is set up to challenge, that this genre of person in this moment can develop a technology product.
You referenced in there Benjamin Bratton and Cathera, a couple of these other institutions. Sylvan, I'm curious to get your perspective here, because again, almost as a newbie to this space, as someone who feels like I kind of stumbled in, like I didn't realize this world existed. Who are the people who have been sort of playing in this kind of artist, founder, creative technologist space? If someone wanted to kind of map that ecosystem in their head, like who are the big players that they need to be aware of?
There are a few people that were really sort of that demonstrated to me that there was an institution like this that was required. And I'll start with an artist called Ian Cheng, who is an animator in New York, had big shows at places like Serpentine in London, and he always had an interest in animation and in neuroscience. And his work was really focused around how we can have a sort of AI as a symbiote in a symbiotic relationship. So rather than thinking of it as being reducible to us, to like being the sycophant that we now see in a lot of like generative AI chatbots, how can it be something that challenges us, that is part of us, but then is slightly beyond us? And so I had a lot of work around this. But then nearly, I think just under 2 years ago now, he starts a company called Opponent that has this system called Dragon, which does exactly what his works of art have been discussing. And so we could see that there is these people that have got these incredible ideas, have been putting them into very large stages, but now want to do the productive intervention, want to actually put it into people's pockets. So this is like a perhaps more like Restless Egg skew. That was a permission why we were going to do it. The moment that I felt that I stumbled into it was really joining this program that was called Transformations of the Human, and this was in the Bay Area. It was a 9-month program, partly funded by the Berkowitz Institute and Reid Hoffman, the founder of LinkedIn, and then set up by this guy Tobias Rees, who is this sort of anthropologist, philosopher, oracle of Delphi to the tech, the sort of the big tech world, by demonstrating that there is the concepts that are used to build technology are outdated, and so therefore the technology that we are building is built for a previous era and not for the one where the technology is not built for the newness of technology. So we spent a lot of time there and working with there's another extremely incredible artist called Pierre Huyghe, who very much an artist but puts a lot of these thoughts into exhibitions that I deeply recommend if you can come across them.
Yeah, I give Benjamin an enormous amount of credit. I think that people tend to think of him, and I think he would think of himself as primarily a philosopher. And I think people who have come through the Strelka program or the Antikythera program or any of the adjacent programs like Media Lab Metadata was started by a Strelka alum. So anyone who goes through those programs, I think, realizes that Benjamin's real skill is as someone who brings people together and really curates a network of people. And the stack is sort of like a kind of initiation ritual almost, where it allows you to sort of speak the same language and adopt similar terms. But the thing about Antikythera, in my experience anyway, is that you get put into this place and you get told in like week 1 that your job is to figure out what planetary computation is about and what it's for. And this is like all deadly serious. And so you're like, this is part of the eyelids being pulled back thing. The stakes become enormous and you're sort of enabled and asked, and in fact, like tasked with thinking about these questions. And it's really an extremely empowering moment that like you're being put into a group of people who are asked to solve these enormous questions and whose answers are taken very seriously. I mean, in the case of Transformations of the Human, they were more of the like consulting, a little bit less, well, they were equally philosophical, but they did a kind of philosophical consulting work. And so they had executives from some of the hyperscalers come in and like ask them, what's up with this AI thing and what is it doing to search revenue?
Let me jump in because
I
think something in there which is interesting, and again one of these other aha moments for us is that there are questions that I have with my family. My grandparents are like, but that we'll be talking about music, and then they'll just turn to me deadly seriously and say, but what will AI do to this? And I sort of look at them like, what do you mean? And I get the instinct. Like, it seems like it is ever present and it's going to be changing everything. Suddenly there'll be no violinists in the orchestras that they like listening to. But that seems, I think for a lot of people, they expect that there are places in the world where there are conversations, there are rooms where like, everyone knows what's going on. And like the experience that I had at Transformations of Human Toft, that everyone is confused. that like we were getting these people in who are like at the frontier of AI as a field, and they they have many questions, and like they are also people that would admit to having these questions. Of course, you can't put it out super publicly if you're a company that is worth over $1 trillion, because if you come out with uncertainty, the market gets scared and suddenly you lose all this money. But the point of the program that we were doing was that there is a intervention that can be made by using the artistic and the philosophical approach to technology. So typically these areas, art and philosophy, are very good for showing openings, for sort of taking something, turning it on its head, taking it apart, looking at it from a different angle. And now we are in an era that technology requires the same thing, that it is not something that you can just like the engineering. My first degree was electronic engineering, and like that was what I thought the way to change the world was sort of through tinkering, through making artifacts that like really function, that have mechanisms. But this moment now feels much more like it's much more ecological. So perhaps we need to learn from biologists, in the sense that you look at a pond, and the way to understand a pond is not to look at it and theorize about it, but to sort of put your finger in it and like take some out, and to really understand that it's not quite as you expected, but you need to sort of you need to make new words for it. But you can't just like build the pond, and then you can't just like let the pond render and then see if it's a good pond. Like the pond exists, and you can sort of like, you can tinker with it. You can, maybe if you add chlorine, it turns out it kills all the frogs. Like you don't want to do that. If you add some sort of other, the metaphor is getting a little wild here.
We're stretching the pond.
I think there's a drain the
Just
pond.
add
No, don't drain
one
it.
final word on that.
Yeah,
I think,
please.
and to bring it all the way back to your original question about sort of who the players are, I think Sylvan is exactly right that an ecological approach is necessary, because it really, so our experience and the way we've described it so far is really through these two programs, Antikythera and Transformations of the Human. But as soon as you go through one, you start connecting to others. So I've mentioned Media Lab Matadero, Trust in Berlin, Sybil in Berlin, NYU Shanghai. I mean, the sort of lurking figure in the background of all of this is, of course, the CCRU, Cybernetic Culture Research Unit. And they're kind of like the
From Warwick
theoretical
University, for those who know.
in Warwick, yeah. The theoretical and intellectual lineage that sort of catalyzed a lot of this, in that what was special about them is that they were receiving the tradition of high theoretical philosophical work and taking very seriously an emerging cyberculture, especially actually cybernetics. And so the lineage of the CCRU is really the marriage of high theory technical development as a kind of program. And I think what Bratton and others have done is suggested that it's not just a kind of position of critique, but actually a posture of development can be birthed out of that. And so what was required of the CCRU is to kind of make sense of the cybernetic moment and deploy the theoretical tools that had been created in the 20th century and before for understanding cybernetics. And then I think what the sort of Strelkaverse and, broadly speaking, does is kind of bring together a group of people to say, can we experiment on those ideas and actually build things out of these concepts? And I think our intervention is, okay, both of those have been successful projects. The moment now is, can the people who have built those interventions scale them up to become mass cultural products in the way that, like, if you think about the way that Bauhaus thinking gets smuggled into the iPhone, such that like every time you open your iPhone, you're actually consuming Bauhaus thinking. Like, can you do a kind of conceptual smuggling, like, and that's very CCRU coded, like this kind of word virus thinking, but like, is it possible to bring these concepts to life in the form of a cultural product, or in the form of a product that is has mass appeal? We think the answer is definitively yes.
And if I can jump in there, so what I kind of hear in all of this, and what I've experienced, being an event, is you have this group of people who are, wrestling with and being given permission within some of these programs to wrestle with big questions about, the nature of our relationship with technology and how it's evolving, and that from your guys' perspective, there is an infrastructural gap there that exists, whereby these people historically don't get money, don't get that permission, don't have the container within which to necessarily do that work. And I guess what I'm intrigued by here is you use the term artist founder, and obviously those are two things that, as people think about them as individual words, they probably picture them quite separately. And on the one hand, maybe they're picturing the artist with his painting in an exhibition, and on the other hand, they might be picturing a Silicon Valley founder. So which of those things almost takes precedent in the concept of the artist founder? Is the thing being built by an artist founder? What I hear, it needs to not be all theory. It's people who also want to build, but is the thing being built, a product that is a sort of demonstration of an idea, and the great outcome of which is that idea spreads and takes root in other areas? Or are they building companies that grow and scale and make money and sort of fall into those paradigms, but they do so whilst sort of challenging the conventional thinking about that?
I think it's such a good question.
So much in that. Which part do you want to do, Sylvan? We've got a number of things that we'd like to say on this. I'll let you go first.
I'll start with that they're in conversation and that they with one another, and they should be in an artist founder, like, rather than one taking precedent.
Mm-hmm.
I think there is, and this is something where there are previous eras of like experiments with arts and technology, which was a thing in the 1960s with Bell Labs and with a number of artists like Robert Rauschenberg. They came to their sort of peak doing a pavilion funded by Pepsi in Japan. Incredibly beautiful thing with a like spherical mirror inside of this building that had perpetual steam outside of it. It was really something there, but their understanding was very much like, there are artists and there are engineers, and we just need to put them in conversation with one another. And our belief, and this moment particularly, is that this is actually embodied within singular people, and that those people are able to work with one another. And there's a reason for this, is that a lot of these, like the frontier sort of artistic mediums, are digital and require a development of a system as well. Like, it's not just making, like, outputting a JPEG, but now it is sort of making a whole workflow such that your protocol, if you like, is your artwork. So you can think of someone like, very famously, Rafik Anadol, a lot of questions around people in the art world, people wrestle over whether they like him or not, but like has really done something enormous here. Another artist called Memo Acton, Daisy Ginsburg. These are all people doing this sort of thing. They really have it both in them. They're making a system. And it's, things like generative AI, game engines like Unreal, and blockchain are all have become these sort of artistic mediums where you have to think about it very creatively, but you have to think about it as a system. And I'll use one example that perhaps is not what most people expect, but Demis Hassabis, the founder of DeepMind, was too young to go to Cambridge when he got his offer. And so in the year between being too young, I think he was 17, and then being old enough to go, he goes and works not for a hedge fund, not for an investment bank, not for the sort of like very typically high status things, but he goes and works in a game studio, and he develops a theme park simulator in this time. And you sort of start to see that this is an extremely interesting, like, creative experiment that he then finds a technical frontier within, because the simulation is so at the core of his interest in computation and in neuroscience. And this gives him a very unique position compared to someone else that has, gone and done an internship, perhaps at IBM, let's say. So I think these are sorts of things these are people that we're looking for. Like, that's the applications that we're really excited by. People that have looked the like very appealing thing dead in the eye and be like, no, I have to create something very strange in order to understand something that I think is different about technology than everyone else considers.
Just a couple of thoughts of my own here. Number one is that I don't think the category of artist founder is transhistorical nor transhistorically necessary. What I mean by that is, when we talk about the artist founder, we don't mean like the painter or the sculptor necessarily. What we're talking about is a kind of artistry that has to do with a sort of avant-garde spirit, of seeing past present conditions as they are. So someone who can look through the present and imagine things as they are not yet, look backwards at the present from the future. And so what we're really interested when we're doing that kind of artist founder, when we're creating the term, is gesturing towards a type of person who is now arising, whose inventions will exceed the frames of reference that exist for them in the moment of coming about. So this is often the way that like epochal technologies are developed. So like we get the telescope many years before we get a developed theory of optics. We get the airplane before we get wing theory. So when we say artist founder, what we're looking for is a kind of sensibility, a kind of untimely sensibility in terms of looking through the present, to see things that can be built before they have names. And I think this is what artists do really well, is they're able to bring things that are not yet thinkable into the world such that they can be thought for the first time, right? And so for us, the real question, or one of the main questions of the AI moment, is what is this for beyond productivity enhancement, right? And so lately I've been especially thinking that people are over-indexed on the intelligence aspect of AI, that if we think of AI as a sort of third substrate of modern life. So if you have electricity as this kind of infrastructural substrate that gets integrated into everything, and then you have the internet as a second substrate, then you have AI. When you use a layup or like send an email, you're not like, oh wow, such electricity, such internet. Like you really notice these things in their absence only, and the absence that you're noticing, that you're registering, is the absence of a kind of experience. A pretty thin experience in the case of like the email, less so in the case of electricity. But the point that I'm making is that I think people are over-indexed on artificial intelligence as intelligence affordance. And if artificial intelligence is a kind of infrastructure, it's an infrastructure that will deliver an experience. And soon we will not be like, such intelligence, which of course is still the moment that we're in. It's like neat that you have these conversational chatbots, but soon we'll be in a moment where, and we're already approaching this, where it's like, damn it, like I can't get access to the AI to do whatever, right? And that will be this kind of experiential signal that I've actually gone from this like Richard Feynman, strange, and then all at once totally familiar kind of progression. And so for me, when we're talking about artist founder, I'm thinking about a kind of person who matches the moment in terms of their ability to look through the kind of needs of today and anticipate things that have not yet been spoken and that don't even have a vocabulary to express them. And really, that's the kind of person that we feel we've discovered. And like I said, I don't think this is like a transhistorical category. Like, I don't think when you're setting up e-commerce, you necessarily want artist founders. Like, you need to kind of just like stand that up. You know what it's supposed to do. But clearly, we are in a moment now where like we have a surplus of like know-how in terms of like the data center build out, and a total lack of vision.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think there's something very interesting here about this moment that you describe. Because what I hear in all of that is that just fundamentally the nature of this moment is so different to those of past technological innovation, or at least to some more moderate ones, like your e-commerce moment you describe. And what you guys seem to be saying is that this type of person, this artist founder, almost has an ability to kind of look round corners that other people either don't have that ability or are not just willing to look around the corner in a creative way at what might be coming, and sort of the new forms of meaning and the architecture, that an opportunity that gets created through things like AI. And at the same time, they are facing up to some of the more philosophical questions about what AI is for, as opposed to adopting necessarily the Silicon Valley mindset of just like build hyperscale, turn it into money. And I guess that kind of leads me into a question here, which is about money, because if we think about, okay, right now, again, if I talk to those two parts of the artist founder that exist within one person, stereotype is founders, lots of money in abundance, mostly VC, as long as you kind of hit X benchmarks and fit our frames of reference for the world, here you go, here's a check. And artists, there are some pretty wealthy artists out there, but as I understand the art world, which is not all that well, a lot of artists, survive with kind of great patrons who, sort of fund their work and maybe, some of the kind of formal infrastructure that allows them to build a reputation. And then eventually their pieces, we kind of instill their pieces with some collective value, and you get a, Damien Hirst who starts selling paintings or things that, for many millions of pounds, and suddenly he is making money. So I'm curious, as you guys are thinking about the infrastructure of capital into this world, where is that coming from? Is it the VCs and Silicon Valley guys looking for new avenues? Is it the great art patrons looking to support the creative spaces in a new way, or is it from somewhere new altogether?
I'm going to take it back to something you said, which and I think it really ties into your answer. And I think it's that there is you said about like, this is a different moment, this technological moment is different from those previous in history. But I think it's really important to state that every single technological moment has been different from every previous technological moment before it. And like one of the big myths, I think, of engineering is as if it is a consistent endeavor. Like the people who call themselves engineers, to be like a frontier, like engineer today of like doing AI models is completely different to those building steam engines, like 150 years ago. It's not even very, very long ago. And I think that like one of the, I guess, most important frames for me is to always consider engineering and sort of scientific endeavors as being deeply cultural. Like they all respond to some sort of cultural need. They all have their own internal culture. And so you can think of, perhaps, I'll see if this metaphor works, but you can sort of think of like engineering or any discipline as like as a sourdough starter that you have it, you add water and flour in from the environment that you're in, and you can take it somewhere else. My mum loves to talk about this. It'd be like, she has a sourdough starter that's 150 years old. It's like, it's as old as yeast is old. It's like, she's understating it. It's like hundreds of millions of years old. Like it's 14 billion years old. But anyway, the point here is that you have these starters, and if you keep it very consistent in one environment, you have structural engineers who do something that looks quite similar to structural engineers did 50 years ago, let's say. But there's ways that has fractured off, understanding how to use glass and steel and cross-laminated timber, like whatever material it is. So they have to evolve. They have to sort of respond to it, how they think about deconstructing the building rather than just constructing it. And so the point, to get to your question here of like where the money comes from, those that understand that there is a different way of building required for this moment. And so these are people that maybe have like a real taste of this frontier. Google had their experiment, sort of moonshot factory called X for a long time, that's gone through like different structures. You have the MIT Media Lab. There are these infrastructures that have been at the sort of creative frontier of technology, but it's really been like fundamental research on the whole there. So you get people funding it, and it's largely patronage. It's like done through philanthropy or Media Lab. It's done for big organizations, to then the MIT Media Lab, big organizations to go in and sort of get a taste of the future, so they can go in, they sort of fund it so they can see this. So like that's one area that I see it as being funded. Another area is simply it's a hedge. Like this is people sort of taking de-risking their other investments. They think that email productivity is really good, but if it's not, then we should probably invest in something that is not that. That's one. And then there's just other people that's, I think, because it's so cultural, I think that it's like, is this a compelling story? Is there like a version of technology that is being developed around this that people want to see, that people want to engage with? And to go back to like the case of Ian Cheng, he has a very nice point about this, that we demonize our phones so much, but when a child is FaceTiming their grandma, we do not demonize the phone. So are there more experiences? How do you make the technologies that we use be more like FaceTiming your grandma? Like, are there more things like that? And they got, like, Ian company got funding from a big, like, from a very well established VC in New York, called BetaWorks. And so there's clearly something there. They understand it to be important from like just a purely like capitalist perspective, that they have to invest in these types of things. So I think, yeah, like perhaps the thing that is changing now is that it doesn't have to be pure like speculation, and there is this sort of this there is a productive form of investment that becomes possible here.
I would just jump in on the last point there and really echo Sylvan's point, and that's there is this awareness that's beginning to take hold. I mean, you even saw it in Sam Altman's most recent blog post, where it's like the ideas guy is finally about to have his or her day in the sun. And this is not an isolated thing. Like, there's an increasing realization that the leash that the market is giving the hyperscalers to just spend is going to get pulled at some point. And it's like, what applications have you built that are actually that make the juice worth the squeeze? So right now, the macro moment is such that companies who are building out the kind of infrastructure revolution I talked about, the core weaves, I mean, obviously the hyperscalers, but then even newer companies like Cursor or Windsurf, right? Everybody sees what they're doing, and that's a kind of very like linear investment that like fetches a high multiple, because the runway to build out the data center revolution is going to cost a great deal. But people are starting to look a little bit forwards to say, okay, what are the experiential affordances of that? We now have like put the AI in your pocket with some secret third device that Johnny Ive has been hired to work on. The Friend, Omi, Rabbit, all of these different wearables. Amazon's getting in the game with a bracelet now. Everybody's kind of slowly waking up to this fact. And I think the aspect that's the macro story. And then on the demand side, for like what we're doing, I think there's an increasing realization from the VCs that we continue to speak to, that the old sourcing channels are not as fresh, and that the ideas that are coming out of them are not as fresh. And that's partly because we have really trained the founder style on a successful model that really did work for the last however many years. And you've written about this. Your colleague Danya has written about this, about how there is a new founder archetype emerging. And I think, we've talked about it on the like founder side, but in the conversations that we continue to have with VCs, there's recognition for this on the demand side, and recognition that the old sourcing channels are not necessarily producing the people who are kind of fringe outsiders anymore. So like the old startup founder is kind of becoming the investment banker, in that it's a very lucrative thing to do, but it's not as cool and hip. And so there's a new type of founder, the artist founder, emerging. And just as a side note, I think the word artist founder, we haven't coined the term, we've adopted it from a number of other places where it's been percolating, but I think it's a term that exists now and needs to exist now as a bridge to the term that these people will give to themselves. I don't think there's a readiness to accept a new term yet. I think founder is very important for legibility, and artist signals that they're looking around the corner, as you say. But I don't think that is necessarily the term that will stay. I think the artist founder will do to the startup as institution what the startup as institution did to the investment bank. I think we're in for a kind of revolution in corporate affairs, to put it that way. Anyway, so to go back to your main question, basically in all of our conversations that we're involved in setting this up, and like, we think that this should exist, is there appetite for it? So that was really the last year of Restless Egg. Is there appetite for this? And what we found is an immense amount.
The phrase that stuck with me from a historical conversation that we had, you referenced something like, all my artist friends want to be technologists and all my technology friends want to be artists. And so there does seem something interesting, kind of cultural zeitgeisty thing going on there. But I want to look ahead. So if I kind of play back a bit of our conversation here, you know, there is this moment in time to do with, you know, the technology, the culture, the big questions we have to ask ourselves about, you know, what technologies like AI are even for. There's the doom mongering. So there's, you know, Sylvan's gran asking him about, you know, that like, what's AI going to do to this? You know, there's the fear mongering of AI is going to take all of our jobs. I hold this all with what I consider to be 2/3 optimism, which is I'm not going to be blind to the fact that a lot of challenges are going to come with new technologies, but I also don't buy into well, AI is just going to take everyone's job without sort of creating anything new. And so I guess with that in mind, if we fast forward, and this is a difficult thing to do because change is happening so quickly, but if we fast forward over the next, say, 5-10 years, what's the hope that you guys are holding on to about the version of the future that artist founders will be a part of creating? If everything, you know, maybe it'll happen, maybe it won't, but like if everything played out as you would love it to play out, how is technology, how is humanity, how is the world different as a result?
We talk a lot about how one of the most damning things that, you know, you don't have to do hypotheticals about AI to say that this is already true, but that there is a loss of agency that people feel. Whether they should feel this, like if they, you know, at the moment, Anthropic have done a lot of training to get people to be able to use Claude in a way that feels good for them, etc. And I think that's a really good step. But I don't know what their figures are on this, but it'll be a very small percentage compared to the number of people who are terrified about it taking their job. And so for us, this is about the permission to have agency in a technological world, in a world that AI exists within. Unfortunately for horses, when the engines came around, the horses no longer had jobs. But like horses get to be racehorses. I don't know, they get to be pleasure things. I think the horse population is down, so maybe this isn't a great one.
I was going to say, you don't want to go around the back of where the stables where they all used to live, right? Definitely less horses.
Well, yeah, they're all beautiful apartments in Chelsea now, in somewhere Muse. No, but I think the point here is that like being able to understand the process, not just AI as a tool, which a lot of people say, and I think means that it loses it. It means that you know what it's. In fact, actually, William, I don't know if you want to say that AI is not a tool, not yet.
Yeah, I mean, so I do as a side project on Restless Egg, I do like a Substack, which is kind of like half take machine, half kind of like turning the dissertation into actionable philosophical entries. And like I said,
William has a PhD in the philosophy of AI, by the way. I don't know if we should say that.
I think we will put that in the show notes. And yeah, William is downplaying. I mean, if anyone you want to listen to the tape recorder of their thoughts, William is a good guy to do that for. So yeah, there's some insight and wisdom in there.
I am the product of two really incredible advisors, two very different people, Luciana Parisi and David Bates. And could not recommend their work any more highly in terms of thinking about technical evolution. I mean, Luciana, formerly of CCRU, now of Critical Computation Bureau. David, who's just published last year this incredible book called The Artificial History of Natural Intelligence, that is your, one-stop shop for the history of philosophy through technology, or the history of the philosophy of technology. So everything that I say that's good really should be accredited to both of them, and a host of other people. To your question, the motivation, well, so the point here is that, and this is very much a David thought, is that a tool is very easy to think about how it incorporates with your sort of instinctual apparatus. So a spear is a tool. It's just a longer and sharper, pointier arm. I know how to use it, right? The first pulley, if we distinguish it from a tool, is a kind of experiment in counter-biological motion, right? So you go down to go up. And the point here is that as not a tool, it is a kind of break in the evolutionary legacy of the human being. Well, this is actually prior to the human being. The first tool, prior to its being a tool, represents a break from the genetically determined line, right? So humans don't evolve purely through genetic affordances. We evolve through non-genetically determined technical affordances, right? And so then we construct an ecosystem that we live in, and so on and so forth. And so the point of saying the pulley is not a tool is to say that it actually forces us to adapt our cognitive infrastructure to it. And this is where actually sociality comes from, according to the paleoarchaeologist and anthropologist Andre Leroy-Gourhan, and then his reading by Stiegler. And so like the social of our species is actually born in communicating how to use these pre-tool experiments. And this is what I was saying to you about the kind of niftiness of the chatbot moment, right? Or the electricity before it becomes just a lamp, the email before it becomes an internet, is this moment of figuring out and communicating about what the gestures are and adapting ourselves to it. So this moment that we're in is one that will set the course for how AI develops, where we will develop the artificial instincts that tell us what this thing is for. So this is also the kind of urgency that I feel, in addition to the responsibility I feel towards the founders. And I'll talk about both of those with regards to your question. You know, how does the future look different? For me,
Just want to say, William, I love that you get the PhD badge and then you just like drop some like really some really good theory.
But yeah, and on that, I kind of want to. So I'm gonna for the low-minded amongst us, myself included, just to make sure I'm passing you correctly here, William. When you talk about the AI not being a tool, so just to play back what I understand and the pulley example. So what I heard then, just to check if I'm understanding correctly, is the pulley is not a tool until we have collectively agreed what it's there to do, and like the purpose of the pulley.
Until what it does has become solidified in instinct.
Okay.
So I like, this is not exactly the Leroy-Gourhan Stiegler. This is more me and Sylvan's thinking, but that. And Sylvan has actually a great phrase that he's come up with in collaboration with Haley Albert called aesthetic surplus, which is when a thing exists in a surplus relationship to its use case. So I think like a spear most often is not in a relationship of aesthetic surplus to its spearness. Like you kind of just like, you know how to poke stuff. But clearly AI is in a relationship of aesthetic surplus to the chatbot. Like it's so obviously the case. And so another friend of mine who I think is incredibly brilliant, Doug Stark, he's a theorist of play and games and among other things. But he says that the kind of relationship that we have to these moments of surplus is that we play in order to adapt. Right, so play fulfills the critical function of allowing us to adapt to the unfamiliar, the excessive, and then incorporate them. So it's not a critique of things becoming tools. That's not the point here. The point is to say that there are moments before things arrive at their toolhood. And this is, again, why the kind of artist-founder moment is that we're tracing out a kind of theory of invention, right? That something begins first as, like these epochal inventions begin first as like an artistic glimmer. Then they get synthesized by a kind of artistry moment. Then they get developed. Then they get productized, right? And only at the last stage do they become artificial instincts. And so what we're hoping to do is basically catalyze that chain all the way up such that the AI revolution is not just a productivity enhancement app. Like, I don't know what it is. I have a great deal of faith in our founders to figure out the answer to that question. I do know what it cannot be. It cannot be allowed to bottom out in email widgets, productivity enhancement apps, margin expansion, like products. That's just not an acceptable answer for this technology. And if it does, the revolution will have failed, and then we'll close up shop and look for something else.
So we're what I take from that is like we are in that moment of play right now, and that the artist founder is, perhaps someone who is better suited to a moment of play than the typical, founder journey might allow for.
Yeah, precisely. I think that's like the two things that you need to understand about Restless Egg is that there is a moment happening now that calls for this skill set, and that these people, it's not just like, how did we get so lucky to find these amazing people? It's like these people are matched to this moment. And that's what matters. And that you're not going to find a better match elsewhere than the people who have been coming up with, who have been trained to answer their whole lives artistic prototypes to answer the question of what planetary computation is for. It's like they've been waiting for this.
Yeah. So I hear in that, I guess what it's not in your hoped for vision of the future. You hope we don't bottom out with just productivity applications of AI, email widgets, etc. As much as those things, might be useful to many of us as a sort of short-term need. Is there anything, Sylvan, you wanted to add about the vision of the future that you'd be excited to see, the artist founder help bring about?
Yeah, just to, I guess, pick back up on the agency point, is that there is so many technical or like startups, technical interventions that are made are framed through the lens of friction reduction. And I think that there are lots of areas where that has been a really good thing. But washing machines, they're extremely useful, dishwashers. Uh, there are areas where we want to reduce friction, but then there are other areas, and particularly in this moment where everyone is searching for meaning. There are lots of conversations around how do you find this, etc. And like I don't have a good answer for this, but I know that the times that I have found to be most fulfilling are the times where I had to really like work very hard on something, find a deep level of focus on it, and feel like it really matters. And at the moment, that feels like it's being pulled away from people, and like not intentionally either necessarily. And so, how to then show that there is like a backdoor, there is a smaller intervention into it. You don't have to be an ML engineer getting paid $200 million at Meta to be able to engage in this. There are other ways of doing it. And I think there's a lot of other tooling out there to do precisely this. One of the companies that we've worked with a lot, called Fuser, are doing this. They have a no-code, node-based system where you can use any AI model, and so it gives someone like an introduction of how they can really use it. And like I've been able to make stuff in there and feel creative, whatever that feeling is. And I think that more things like that. I'll just do a quick shout out to the other companies that we're working with, because I think that they are all doing this to some degree. There's another one, Blue Leaf. They are doing this. They are able to integrate generative AI with game engines, and so you're able to make these sort of more like ecological, more reactive forms of animation. That it's just very magical, and you can see how their outputs. They are also extremely talented animators, filmmakers, directors. The list is too long to fit on any page, but they do this as well. So it gives people an introduction to how generative AI can be used within animation that doesn't suck, that doesn't become the sort of the boring mid journey. And then finally, Nephila, they're creating this social media where people are able to collaborate not they're not in us just posting things, but they collaborate on the sort of production side of it. So you have this one larger file space where you put in, perhaps you're a fan of, name your favorite band. We've just been talking about Blackpink with them, and so you upload perhaps concert footage. You put in your short story that you've written about, your fan fiction, your erotica, like whatever it is about these people. You put it into this little, like this zone of other people who are also obsessed about this one thing, and then you can generate content from it. So here we have a tool that brings people together, that shows the sort of like the freak side of people, rather than the strange like homogenization of many social medias where we are forced to turn into a sort of more automatic version of ourselves. Like, I think we all feel this with something like LinkedIn. You're pulled on there and you're like, it's like, this is like, I'm pleased to say, and like, I get it. People want to do that. They want to like make sure that they're seen, make sure that they can like get the promotion that they need. And like, you got to do it. Like, that's how you make your own life. But I don't think I've spoken to a single person who likes doing it. I'm sure they are out there, and honestly, respect to them. I'm sure they're doing very well for themselves.
Honestly, I've just gotten on LinkedIn in the last year, and I kind of like LinkedIn.
Yeah, you're so made for it.
William's that guy. William's a guy. I mean, for those who haven't discovered it, there is an Instagram account called Best of LinkedIn, which is probably will share some of those people who look like they're enjoying LinkedIn more than the rest of the general population. Look, guys, I'm going to
just to come in, just as a quick one on there, like the thing with these people, like they feel a high degree of agency through LinkedIn, and like I have a huge respect for that. And I think that like that is the trick, is like finding the technologies that give you this feeling of agency, that like that you perhaps you have to break it, perhaps you have to sort of hack it together. That's what we're pushing forward, is that there's a methodology here that is available, not just for these like, the cracked 10x engineer, nor for the person that's gone through it with an MBA, but there are these other options. And so sort of showing the sort of plurality of entry roads into technology. Technology is not one thing, and it has always been this sort of like strange branching organism. That's really that's the ideal version, where people understand that and see that it is in fact something that they can do themselves.
Yeah, I think just to add on that, I get the sense that many of us, part of the reason why tech has been demonized, alongside some of the crazy folks who sort of represent the industry in a very public way, there's a sense for many of us that the technologies have been built and executed in such a way where we all somehow feel exploited, whether it's because our data is being harvested, that the algorithms are sort of not serving us, and so this word about agency, I think, to me is what really kind of almost stands out as a finishing point here for our conversation, that a world in which we feel agency in our relationship to technology, and therefore we feel no need to kind of have this resentful relationship towards it, because actually it then serves and meets our needs in an additive way. And so, sorry, William, go ahead.
If I may, just on sort of what this agency can unlock, and I think Sylvan has touched on it through each of the companies that he mentioned, and I just want to emphasize sort of connecting these threads together. Like when these people become newly empowered, I mean, they're already extremely high agency people, but like when their visions receive this kind of permissioning infrastructure, what we have seen is that, in the case of Nephilah, for example, their sort of philosophical vision is that the prime unit of the internet is miscast as the individual, and that's basically a boon for the surveillance capitalism companies, and that what generative AI has shown us is that the prime unit of the internet is in fact the swarm. And so they've basically redevised a social operating system to leverage this and sort of cure social media of kind of its incentive system for outrage factory and like horrible misinformation. So they have like a very broad vision that is couched in a kind of like, here's a specific use case, a technology, and a productivity wrapper. So we don't have any assumptions that like we come into the market and we're like, here's our revolutionary technology that will create a new category. Doesn't everybody want to use this? It's like, no, everybody's still using iPhones for the same reason. They don't just switch phone every day. So we're not naive to the fact that like the philosophical revolution has to kind of have a sugar for the pill wrapping that can allow and accommodate current users. So Fuser, another really good example, they have this tool that reduces the amount of friction that it takes to go between different models. Their slogan, every model everywhere all at once, allows the user to put in the different models in a unified canvas. But they have like a philosophical long picture, which is just like, if models continue to diverge, given the like walled gardening of data, Reddit just sued one of the hyperscalers, I can't remember which. But if models continue to diverge, the true experience of using AI is using all of the models, not a single one. So it's a kind of grand bazaar of models. Blue Leaf imagines like a kind of human AI co-creative process that answers the question, what comes after cinema? Which like, I want to know. And then we're in early conversations about like the spatial experience that's AI enabled, the sort of memory selfhood experience. We're in the we're kind of in the trenches of answering this question, and the exciting part about this job is the responsibility that you feel to allow these people to sort of expand these visions to the fullest extent possible, and to become excited with them about realizing that, and then get down to like the sort of nitty gritty of standing it up from the very first instance.
And we're accepting applications now. So
I was going to ask. So, like, where do people find you guys? More information about the Restless Egg? We'll also
restlessegg.com.
Restlessegg.com.
On all the socials. Actually, a lot of the references that we've got today, and to your point of who the people to look at, if people are interested in more, we have a sort of egg soup that is, if you just on our website, you navigate to it. And you can go through, and it's a sort of our own arena board, our own sort of mood board that you can see a lot of the things that we've talked about in more detail. But our applications are on there as well. William has a Substack that's on there. We just did a dozen radio shows that collected the sort of sonic side for a lot of these people. So there's a lot on there. So if you've got a rainy day that you want to be immersed in the egg, that's your go-to spot.
What an invite. Well, I hope, if nothing else, people who listening or watching this will think a bit differently. I think that's like one thing I value in the conversations every time we catch up is, they think beyond the common use cases of current technology and how it's being applied, and realize there are so many broad implications and applications, and also a lot of smart people spending their time devoted to sort of figuring this out, not just in a way that's going to be monetize and exploit us, but also in ways that hopefully will serve us too. So guys, I really appreciate you coming on, and thanks for joining Humans in the Loop.
Thanks so much, Seb.
Pleasure.